Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I firstly want to thank the Secretary of State for giving me advance sight of his statement. But the real thanks have to go to our councillors of all political persuasions and none, and to the frontline heroes who, despite almost a decade of austerity, have worked hard to keep our local public services going at the same time as demand has increased and funding has fallen through the floor. It is the under-resourcing of local government, and the sector has lost 60 pence in every pound of central government funding, according to the Tory-led LGA, and the reverse redistribution policies of the Right Honourable Gentleman's Ministry that has exacerbated these problems, and he cannot hide from that fact. Now let's bust the myth, and it might come as a revelation to the Secretary of State and his ministers, but not all areas are the same. Some areas have greater deprivation, greater poverty and greater demand for people-based services as a consequence. And yet these same areas have fronted the heaviest cuts, and that is continuing. It's not ending. But the government's approach, and we've heard it here again today, is to shift the burden onto council tax. He knows, and it's an inconvenient truth, that areas like the one I represent, or my honourable friend the member for Oldham West and Royton represents, cannot bring in anything like the resource from council tax that his own council can bring in, and that widens the inequality across England. So can the Secretary of State confirm how much of the 2.8% that he's announced to fanfare is actually being raised through council tax rather than from central government funding? And on that, can he confirm that he's recommending an inflation-busting council tax rise this year to local government to plug his department's gaps? And how will he therefore address the inequality issue, whereby revenue support grant is distributed on a needs-based formula, but council tax revenue is collected and spent locally, meaning that the richest parts of this country will be able to raise sufficiently more than the parts of the country with real deprivation and real demand on public services? And on revenue support grant, can he confirm that his plans mean a £1.3 billion cut to RSG next year, offsetting the £1.3 billion spending that his announcement has made? That really is the reverse redistribution that I talked about. And does he agree with his official who told the Public Accounts Committee that the sector is only sustainable if it delivers only statutory services? But the Secretary of State will know that councils deliver much more than the bare legal minimum, 700 or more non-statutory services to be precise. Sure Start centres, libraries, parks, museums, investment in youth. All are not included in his assessment of sustainability. So which of these should councils stop providing altogether if they are to take the advice of his officials? Because, Mr. Speaker, the truth about this statement is that it was the worst Secret Santa ever. Because much of what he's announced today was already announced by the Chancellor in his budget. There's nothing new. On adult social care, we were told by the Tory-led LGA that they need £1.3 billion next year and £2 billion for children's services. And yet the Secretary of State has re-announced £650 million, not even for both, but also it could be shared with the NHS. How's that going to be split between adults, children's, the NHS? Can he clarify? The Secretary of State says he's working with the Health Secretary to soon publish a green paper on social care. Given the pressures that councils are facing now and the real heartbreak and misery experienced by service users, can he tell us how soon is soon? Or is this like the Brexit meaningful vote, whereby no date is ever given? The fact is, social care is in crisis. The promised Green Paper is now delayed by 4 times, and it's over a year late. And on public health, we've seen this week that health inequalities are widening. Life expectancy is going backwards in the poorest parts of the country. And after £700 million of cuts to public health budgets, and more cuts next year, falling disproportionately on the poorest areas, why isn't he doing more to protect these budgets from being used for clearly non-public health projects? Now, Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, on the steps of Downing Street and again last night, the Prime Minister promised to build a country that works for everyone. At the conference, she promised to end austerity. But isn't it the case today that Brokenshire today delivered another broken promise? Food bank use has increased to the highest rate on record. Child homelessness has increased to the highest level in recent years. And yesterday, we were told for the first time since records began, life expectancy has come to a standstill and in some areas is falling. The UN's Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights has warned that local authorities had been gutted by a series of government policies. Although he may wrap up his statement in Christmas paper, when we unwrap the parcel, we will still see poorer areas in this country getting poorer. And this, Mr. Speaker, should frankly shame us all.